Hey there guys, welcome back for another presentation in your World Regional Geography course. This time we're going to introduce Sub-Saharan Africa. So let's introduce the realm. Sub-Saharan Africa is everything south of the Sahara Desert. The African Transition Zone divides North Africa from the rest of Africa, and the areas north of that transition are dominantly a desert or semi-arid climate. Areas south are semi-arid to rainforest. The Kalahari and Nambia deserts are located in southern Africa. The main rivers in Africa are the Nile, the Niger, Congo, and the Zambezi. Since the equator runs right through the middle of the continent, the tropical environment causes poor soil quality due to excessive rainfall. Remember that most areas that are categorized as a rainforest can rain up to 200 inches per year. Los Angeles, we range between 14 and 16 inches per year, so a very dramatic difference. Also, as deforestation continues and populations continue to grow, resources and food are becoming limited, including large game. They're finding that a lot of the large game in Africa is being hunted for food. So the map to the right will introduce the realms that will be discussed today. We'll be discussing part of West Africa, Central, Southern, and East Africa. Now, while we're kind of introducing the realm, we know that West Africa was home to a number of large empires, as observed in the map in the top right-hand corner. Gold, salt, copper, and ivory were very important trading economies for those in this region. Since mining requires manual labor, slavery became a component in the warfare between the groups and the tribes. West Africa was also called the Slave Coast due to the high number of local people from the area who were sold into European slave trade and shipped to the Americas. The demand for slaves continued to cause African kingdoms to expand their capturing of indigenous Africans. For a continent of this size, it is surprising that Africa does not have extended mountain ranges comparable to those in Europe and South America. However, Africa does have the Ethiopian highlands and plateau that reach an elevation of 15,000 feet. Eastern Africa does have some very well-known volcanic peaks, such as Mount Kilimanjaro. Lastly, by 1900, European powers claimed most of Africa, except for Ethiopia and Liberia. European colonialism remained strong until the end of World War II, which left many European countries economically exhausted. It wasn't until 1990 when the last colony was freed. The map on the right-hand side is obviously of Africa, but showing the African colonies after the Berlin Conference of 1884. The Berlin Conference was held in which they decided who was going to take control of these areas. So as we can observe, there's only two areas that remain free. Otherwise, we see that there was Spanish, French, Italian, British, German, and Belgium, and Portuguese were also involved in colonialism in Africa. Let us also introduce the population density and relief map. So as we can observe, there's definitely a correlation when looking at population density and the raised relief, which also, if you notice on the right-hand side, that is the raised relief map, we can observe the greenery from the areas that are closer to the equator. We also see that there is a correlation within densities and water, which makes sense. We also observe here that there are stronger densities in Africa near the ocean and large bodies of water inland. So as we can see here, there's a very large population that lives around this lake. We see that there's also populations that live here along the western edge of Africa. And also we can see that there's a correlation, as we'll talk about in a little bit, in Eastern Africa. Now let's talk a little bit about the human geography of Sub-Saharan Africa. Now economically, Sub-Saharan Africa focuses on raw materials and very cheap labor. Nearly 70% of the population works in agriculture, and most earn between $1 and $3 a day. American dollars, that is. Since so many work in agriculture, this leaves very little time and people to develop a large educated group of professionals. And I see I got a spelling error there, I apologize. Sub-Saharan Africa is more than 2.3 times the size of the United States, and language is a genuine barrier for the people that live there. There are 6 main language families with many variations of each. Nigeria alone has more than 500 different languages spoken and read there. Religion is split as well, mostly Islam, which is Sunni and Shiite, and those are to the north, as well as Christianity to the south, and a scattering of tribal and animism religions in the middle. So this diagram here on the right of Africa is just really distinguishing the different language groups that are identified. But again, each language group has its own variation and style that can be very, very different. So let's introduce West Africa. Most of West Africa lies in the African Transition Zone, with portions north and south of the transitional region. Dry desert conditions exist to the north and tropical conditions exist to the south. West Africa is made mostly of independent states, which were under French colonization, most of at least, that share very similar economies and share rapidly growing populations and also increased poverty. In spite of the political difficulties, poverty, and lack of natural resources for themselves, the people of West Africa hold vibrant cultural values and revolve around family and religion. The diversity of languages, religious beliefs, and rich cultural traditions provide an African heritage that is celebrated and valued by its people. Now looking at Central Africa. The 2 landlocked countries of Chad and the Central African Republic have endured unstable conditions in their transition to be independent, stable democratic states. Most of the dispute pertains to the ownership of nearby land that is rich in mineral deposits and uranium. The civil wars in the Congo are traditionally based on political control as well as control over valuable resources in those eastern states. Central Africa resonates with cultural and ethnic diversity. Hundreds of ethnic groups live and work together with a high degree of interaction. Traditional cuisine and beverages such as coffee, tea, or beer can be found throughout this region. I also wanted to include this image, resources that are found in the Congo. So as we mentioned before, this is really the driving part of much of the civil wars and really that stress within this region, because as we can see, there's coal, cobalt, tin, oil, coltan, diamonds, copper, and gold. You probably have heard of all of those except for coltan. Coltan is used in electricity. It has high heat and energy tolerance. So let's look at East Africa. These are the highest mountains in Africa, including Mount Kilimanjaro, which is about 19,341 feet. It's located in Tanzania near the border of Kenya. The second highest peak in Africa is Mount Kenya at 17,058 feet. Now the average size in East Africa, family size, is 5.5, which is actually quite traditional throughout Africa. In many areas of Africa in general, East Africa in particular, most of the population, at least 80% in these areas, make a living off the land and agriculture. Large families in rural areas create the conditions for the highest levels of rural to urban shift of any continent in the world. Now, the physical geography of East Africa is dominated by the Great Rift Valley, which extends through the middle of the region north to south, as we can observe here. Associated with the Rift Valleys are vast savannas, such as the Serengeti, there's large lakes, high mountains, and the highlands of Ethiopia. Areas along the African Transition Zone have experienced a higher degree of political conflict and civil unrest. Somalia has the highest level of political division and fragmentation based on religion and ethnic backgrounds alone. Diversity in the region is remarkably high. There are hundreds of different indigenous ethnic groups, each with its own language and culture. Religious activity is split between Christianity, Islam, and traditional beliefs. Another thing that I wanted to point out, as we mentioned here, this map of East Africa, notice the red line that does represent plate boundaries. So we can see that there is active tectonics, which then leads into the reason and the development of that transition zone. So let's talk about Southern Africa. Now, the climate in Southern Africa is definitely mixed between B and C types of climates. The Kalahari Desert, which lies mainly in Botswana, is an extensive desert region with an arid mixture of grasslands and sand. The mainland region of Southern Africa has extensive mineral deposits that provide resources for its countries to gain national wealth. Colonialism made its footprint on the region by creating borders and providing colonial-style names. The transition from colonial to independent nation has caused political and economic difficulties. We also include Madagascar in Southern Africa, is separated from the mainland of Africa and provides a habitat for animals and plants not found on the mainland itself. So, let's test it. I've provided 4 sample questions here and we'll discuss the answers. The first question is, one of the main reasons for the lack of social unity in West Africa is... The second question is, Madagascar, off the east coast, has different flora and fauna from the mainland because... Question 3, East Africa is dominated by what geographic feature? And question 4, what large deposits are located in the Democratic Republic of the Congo? Don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't done so, and comment with your answers below. So let's talk about the answers real quick. Question 1. One of the main reasons for the lack of social unity in West Africa is the high diversity. There's hundreds of ethnic groups and languages, and it can be quite challenging for people to communicate. And that's not just in normal conversation. That's even politically. Madagascar, off the east coast, has different flora and fauna from the mainland because of tectonic activity. East Africa is dominated by what geographic feature? Well, that's the Great Rift Valley. And last, what large deposits are located in the Democratic Republic of the Congo? We discussed gold, diamonds, and coltan. I hope this was helpful. Don't forget to hang around and check out the rest of the videos, and we'll talk soon.